You can't have a Christmas dinner without a dessert. And these recipes are sure to impress everyone at the dinner table. Hey y'all, I'm Valerie and welcome to my kitchen. In today's video, I'm sharing 5 delicious dessert recipes you can make for Christmas. Okay y'all, let's get started. This is my no-bake oatmeal cream pie marshmallow cheesecake, and I think you're gonna love it. To get started, you're gonna add in 2 of the 8-ounce blocks of softened cream cheese, and it's very, very important that these are completely softened, or else the cheesecake filling will not be completely creamy. You're also gonna add in 1 cup of powdered sugar, and we're gonna go ahead and mix these 2 together until they're completely smooth. So I'm curious, do y'all prefer baked cheesecakes or no-bake cheesecakes? I'm not picky when it comes to cheesecakes. I'll take either one. Okay, I got that mixture nice and smooth. Now I'm adding in 1.5 cups of marshmallow fluff. And this stuff is very, very sticky, but it's also very, very good. Now I'm adding in a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and then I'm going to mix it until it's well combined. Now you have a choice on what you use for this next ingredient. I'm using an 8-ounce container of whipped topping. I'm just folding that into the cream cheese mixture. But if you want, feel free to make your own homemade here. I'm just taking the easy way out. And I'm technically supposed to fold that in, but I just used my mixer and mixed it until it was well combined. Now we're going to set that aside so we can make the crust. I'm using a 9-inch springform pan. You'll need a 12-count box of the oatmeal cream pies, and you're just going to completely cover the bottom of that pan with those. And then I started to flatten them out here and felt like I needed to add 1 more oatmeal cream pie just to fill in those little empty spots. And it does not have to be perfect. So I used a total of 7 oatmeal cream pies for the bottom of this crust. And then when you get that all packed down in there nice and even, we're going to make up the sides. I took those remaining 5 oatmeal cream pies and I cut them in half. And then I turned each one up flat side down and went all the way around that springform pan. And when you put them in here, you do want to press against the sides and also press them at the bottom to connect them to that bottom crust. We got that done, and now it's time to add in that marshmallow cheesecake filling. And y'all, this stuff is delicious. You're just going to pour that in and spread it out into an even layer. And I had to kind of mush mine down in there to get it all filled completely to the edges. Now this is going into the refrigerator to chill until it's completely set. I'd say at least 6 hours, but I let mine chill overnight. And yes, my husband was driving me crazy until I got this out and cut it. But I'm telling you, it is well worth the wait. This is absolutely delicious. That marshmallow cheesecake filling goes perfectly with those oatmeal cream pies. Now, if you don't like oatmeal cream pies, or maybe you just don't have them on hand, feel free to make your own graham cracker crust for this. It'll still be delicious. But I'm telling you, those things just take this cheesecake to a whole nother level. And they make it look pretty. You definitely got to try this one. And that marshmallow fluff in there just adds the best flavor. And this cheesecake sets up beautifully. This red velvet poke cake is perfect for the holidays. I'm starting out in a large bowl and I'm adding in 1 box of red velvet cake mix. I'm using Duncan Hines. It's a 15.25 ounce box, but you can use whatever kind of cake mix you like, because we're going to mix this up according to the directions on the back of the box. I added in milk instead of water, eggs, and oil. And then I'm just using my electric mixer and I'm going to mix this until it's well combined. I mixed it for about 2 minutes. Now this is ready, and I'm making this in a 9x13 baking dish. but you can also use a pan. Just make sure you spray it with some kind of nonstick spray. Then I poured in that delicious red velvet cake batter and then smooth it out into an even layer. It kind of levels itself out though. Now we're going to put this cake in the oven and let it bake according to the directions on the back of the box. Here it is out of the oven, and I checked it with a toothpick just to make sure it was done. Okay, and while this is still warm, we're going to poke holes in the top of it. But first, I wanted to try something a little crazy here. So you know how cakes kind of rise a little more in the middle? I decided to cut some of that off, not because I wanted it all even, but I wanted some of those cake crumbles, the red cake crumbles. That way I had something to sprinkle over the top of the cake when it was done, instead of doing sprinkles. I just thought it would look really pretty with some of those cake crumbles on top of that icing. I set those aside, and now I'm poking holes all over the top of that cake. The more holes you can poke in here, the better. Next, I'm pouring over 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. And I honestly don't know what in the world I was thinking here with this can. I had it turned all which ways, upside down and backwards, but I got that sweetened condensed milk out. And now I'm just spreading it all over the top of that cake, and you want to really work it into those holes. And I let it sit here for a couple hours so everything could soak in and it could completely cool. And now we're going to make up a cream cheese frosting for it. In a large bowl, I added 8 ounces of softened cream cheese, along with 1 stick of softened butter. I also added 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I'm going to mix this until it's completely smooth. I'm going to add in 3 cups of powdered sugar now. And normally I don't sift mine, but for this I did. Just because I didn't want to see any clumps of powdered sugar in the icing. Oh, and I did add that a little at a time because it's way easier to mix that way. Now, if you're feeling like this is a little too thick, which mine was, you can add 1 to 2 teaspoons of milk or heavy cream. Just add it a little at a time until it gets to your desired consistency. You still want it to be thick, but you also want it to be smooth. This frosting is delicious, by the way. Now we're ready to add it to the cake. And I just poured it all on, or spooned it all on, and spread it all out. By the way, you can use this frosting for any cake you like, really. It is very, very good. And I don't know what I would do without this offset spatula here. I use it for so many things. Well, I do bake a lot. But if you do also, then I highly suggest getting one. And I'm pretty sure this one is older than I am. Okay, now I'm taking those cake crumbles that I saved from earlier, and I sprinkle those over the top of the cake. I put this in the refrigerator for about an hour just to chill up a little bit, and then it is ready to serve. This cake is absolutely delicious. Oh, and I did want to say, if you want it a little less sweet, you can always cut back on the condensed milk to 1/2 of a can instead of using the whole can, but we love it. And you could even sprinkle the top of this with some chopped pecans. That would be really good. But this cake is so, so pretty, and it would be perfect on the dinner table, or on the dessert table, I should say. I seen this bread pudding on TikTok, and my husband had just mentioned wanting me to try bread pudding. So I jumped all over it. I've got 1 loaf of French bread here, and I cut it into cubes. You want this to be a little dried out, kind of stale. And since mine was really fresh, I put it in the oven on 300 degrees for about 10 or 15 minutes until it was dried out. You don't want to toast it, just dry it out a little. Now I'm making the custard for this. In a large bowl, you're going to add in 2 cups of heavy cream, along with 1 can of evaporated milk and 1 can of sweetened condensed milk. And now I'm adding 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1/3 cup of brown sugar, 4 eggs, half a stick of melted butter, and a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. And you can mix this by hand or whisk it by hand, but I'm just using my mixer and mix it until it's well combined. And the recipe didn't call for this, but I added about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I'm adding in that cubed up French bread. And I really wanted y'all to hear how dry and crispy that bread was. The point is to take all the moisture out of that bread so it can soak up all that custard. And I forgot to add a teaspoon of vanilla, so I'm adding that now. Hey, at least I remembered. Better late than never. Okay, I'm just mixing this around and getting it all covered in that custard, and then I'm going to let it sit out on the counter here for about 20 minutes to soak up as much custard as possible. And when that's ready, I'm ready to pour it into the baking dish. I'm using a 9x13, and I did spray mine really good with nonstick spray. And now we can go ahead and pour in that bread pudding. And I poured it in and kind of spread it out evenly into an even layer, and then I pressed down onto the bread to kind of submerge it in that custard. That way everything was pretty well covered. Now we're going to cover this tightly with foil, and the recipe called for to bake it at 350 for 1 hour and 10 minutes. Now she did top hers with 1 cup of chopped pecans, but I decided to wait until halfway through to add mine. That way they didn't burn, and I did take the foil off the last 15 minutes or so just to get that top golden brown. By the way, you want to cook it until a knife inserted comes out clean. Okay, now we're going to make a frosting for this, or a glaze for this, using 1 container of caramel frosting and half a stick of butter. I know that might sound a little different, but I was just trusting the process. I microwaved that until it was completely melted and completely smooth. Now I'm just pouring it all over the top of that bread pudding. And I started to hold back here because it did seem like a lot, but I decided I had already mixed it up and I was going to add it all. And then I just let this sit for about 15 minutes so it could kind of absorb some of that glaze, and then it is ready to serve. This was amazing. I will say though, next time, because I will be making it again, I'm only going to do half the container of caramel frosting with maybe 2 tablespoons of butter. Only because it did end up being a lot of glaze, but my husband loved the sweetness. Now, he wasn't a fan of the pecans in this. He wanted it to be all just the bread, you know, bread pudding, but I loved the crunch from the pecans. So if you like them, add them, and if you don't like them, leave them out. This is a new favorite right here though. My mama had been talking about a coconut custard pie, so I decided to make one. We're going to make up the filling first. In a large bowl, I added a cup of sugar and 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. I gave this just a little whisk just to mix up that flour with the sugar. Oh, and pause on that filling there. I'm using a frozen pie crust for this. You don't have to, but I didn't want that crust to be soggy, so I par-baked it for about 5 minutes before I added the filling. And you do want to poke holes in the bottom of that pie crust just so it don't bubble up. Okay, back to the sugar and flour. To that mixture, I'm adding 1 stick of melted butter, 3/4 cup of milk, you can use any kind, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and I added about 1/4 teaspoon of coconut extract. But that's optional. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. Now that butter was still a little warm, so I gave this a really good mix before I added the eggs. I'm adding in 2 beaten eggs. Now I'm going to mix it until everything is very well combined. Do y'all have a favorite pie? You'll have to let me know below. Now I'm adding a little over a cupful of sweetened shredded coconut. And I just eyeballed that. I didn't want to dirty up a measuring cup for that. I just stirred that to get that coconut all mixed in, and then it's ready to pour into the pie crust. And I decided to get out a sheet pan to put the pie on, because that way, in case the pie overflows, I am safe. And don't forget, I did put that pie crust in the oven to bake for about 5 minutes. I poured in that filling and then topped it with a little more shredded coconut. I used about 1/4 of a cup there. And you want to be very, very careful when you pick this up. You don't want to spill anything. And then this is going into the oven to bake at 350, anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes. You want to make sure it's completely set. And I did put a pie crust shield on halfway through, and close to the end there, I covered the top with foil. I love this little pie crust shield here. It really helps out a lot. And y'all, this came out perfectly. This was so good, and my mama loved it. I sent some home with her, and she even had it for breakfast the next day. I thought it had just the perfect amount of sweetness. I love coconut. I love anything coconut. That filling was rich and creamy, and we definitely will be making this again. It's a perfect dessert for the holidays. I am trying out a lemon eclair, requested by my daddy. He's the king of chocolate eclairs. He carries them to every family get-together, and he wanted to try lemon. Y'all, he bought everything for it and sent it all down, so you know I had to make it. In a large bowl, I added 2 of the small packages of, this is real life here. Okay, as I was saying, I added 2 small packages of lemon instant pudding, along with 3 cups of milk. You're going to mix that until it's thickened, and then we're going to fold in 16 ounces of whipped topping. Now, my daddy said he uses 3 8-ounce containers of whipped topping for his chocolate eclairs, but I only had 2 containers, so I just went with this, and it worked out just fine. And you're just going to fold it in until it's combined. And I think the dish he makes his in is a little bigger than the one I made mine in, because mine barely all fit in here. So I suggest only doing 16 ounces of the whipped topping. Now we're going to lay down a layer of graham crackers. And I like to completely cover the bottom of that dish. You can break crackers into pieces, do whatever you can do, or do whatever you have to do to cover the entire bottom. It's like you're doing a little puzzle here. Now we're going to pour over half of that filling. And as I was pouring it, those graham crackers started to slide up the sides, but I just pushed them on back down, pushed them flat, and kind of worked that pudding over it, and then it was just fine. You're just going to spread all that into an even layer. Now it's time to do another layer of graham crackers. And then we're going to pour over the other half of that filling. By the way, if you wanted to amp up the lemon flavor in that filling, you could always add some lemon zest, but I didn't have a lemon on hand, so I didn't. And now we're going to do a third and final layer of graham crackers. So I ended up using an entire box for this. And for the frosting for this, I'm using 1 container of the store-bought lemon frosting. I melted that in the microwave until it was melted and pourable, and then you're going to pour it all over the top of those graham crackers. And you can see here, it barely fit in this casserole dish here. And I did not leave any of that frosting behind. I got it all. Now to add a little something extra to the top, I had a couple broken graham crackers left, so I crushed those and sprinkled them over the top. Now this is going into the refrigerator for at least 4 or 6 hours, or even better, overnight. It needs time to chill. But I'll be honest, I had some people that really wanted to try this, so mine only refrigerated for about an hour. And I will tell you, this was a little different, or the frosting turned out a little different than the regular chocolate eclair. That chocolate frosting stays soft, but this lemon frosting kind of hardened up, but it was still delicious. And by the way, my daddy loved it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. You may also like these. Don't forget to subscribe down below for more easy recipes. Oh, and I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. I love you all, and I will see you in my next video.